What's up, my friends? I have had a task that I've been stuck with for quite some time. The book we are talking about today. I read it many months ago, and still I sit here stuck on what to say. Not because there isn't anything to say. Far from it, actually. There's almost too much to say about this book. And so much of it I'm finding is really hard to put into actual words. It's more just exasperated noises of adoration and excitement over what I read in this story. This book is trying to tackle a lot of things throughout the course of the story. A lot more than many other books, and if a book is trying to tackle as many things as this one is, they tend to be significantly longer. And because of that, it's really hard for me to showcase just how wonderful this book is and how compact and precise and efficient it is in telling the story that it wants to tell. But all of this has kept me away from being able to talk about it, sit down and really put my thoughts to the page. But today is the day that I conquer that. Today, we are talking about Robert Jackson Bennet's The City of Stairs, which is the first book in the Divine Cities trilogy. Robert Jackson Bennet is also the author of another series that I've had on my radar for quite some time, probably longer than the Divine Cities trilogy, which is the Founders Trilogy, starting with Foundryside. This was the book that hit the vibes that I wanted when I was going through my little book roulette, and I picked this one instead of that one, so this is what we're talking about today. I'll give you my spoiler-free rundown as normal, see if you want to read it, pause the video, go check it out, come back, see what I gotta say that's a bit more spoilery, as I combat slide right into those deeper thoughts in this wrinkly brain of mine. As I said, The City of Stairs is the first book in the Divine Cities trilogy. It takes place in a world where once gods graced the land. The divine continent was ruled and overseen by 6 powerful gods performing miracles and building cities of wonder. But with all the power that comes from these gods, the divine continent was able to enslave the smaller nation of Sepur until rather recently, when Sepur rose up and destroyed the gods, throwing the continent into disarray. Many of the gods' miracles, and even the entirety of some cities built by their miracles, winked out of existence, leaving what was left to be conquered by the once oppressed nation. The first book follows Shara Comaid, using the cover of being a diplomat from this smaller nation, now having all of this governmental control over the divine continent. She's going into one of their big cities, the City of Stairs, Bulakov, as a junior diplomat to be able to slide into the city and actually investigate the murder of one of her once confidant and close friends, a high-ranking historian of Sepur, who was doing research into the history of the divine continent. She's thrown into this thrilling mystery as more and more unfolds in the city of Bulakov, revealing truths lost to history and conspiracies beyond her scope. Now, this sounds super cool. A light fantasy, political spy mystery thriller, a book that does not sit in any one genre is always something that'll grab my attention. And this book certainly was hitting many nails on the head to not be able to be nailed down to one genre. Ignore that metaphor. We're moving on. I need to forewarn you. This book, despite how smooth of a read and how well paced it is, covers a massive swath of topics. If you stack them all up like 625 in that sandwich stacker game on the Disney Channel website, you're gonna get a pretty pretentious sandwich. This book is exploring so many themes. It's honestly quite difficult to pin down any one theme as the forefront of this story. You got slavery, oppression of people through governmental censorship, ethnic cleansing, retributive justice, patriotism, cultural hegemony, resilience, resistance, going against what is virtuous for what you know to be the greater good, religious fanaticism, political intrigue, all on top of this murder mystery that we're exploring. And there are still other themes that I didn't mention, such as the very interesting exploration of the fact that this is a really interesting kind of loose interpretation of a Tsarist Russia representation and a Mughal India representation clashing over beliefs, which is a refreshing look at fantasy when normally we're used to super European medieval times kind of settings. This kind of mixes that up for us. Phew, oh my God. Robert Jackson Bennet is truly juggling so many balls in this book, and it really doesn't feel like he fumbles at all. As I might have with any book, there are a few points that I wish could have been stronger, but honestly, that is overshadowed by the craft and care put into writing this story. This book is, for the most part, fairly serious in tone. There are certainly characters that bring it levity. Sigrid, Shara Comaid's bodyguard and close friend, whom she describes as her secretary for official purposes, is a man from the Drailing northern continents area. His description really gives off a tone of a very Nordic Viking style, and he brings super awesome take on the silent bodyguard trope that we see so often that I really love. And he's also quite possibly my favorite character in the book. He's hilariously comical to have around because he's much more gruff, than other characters that surround him in this city. And those interactions and clashes of decorum bring a lot of comedy to the story, while we're also getting along the way a greater appreciation for him and his story and how he acts. He is incredibly skilled and intelligent, but he just doesn't care about outward appearances. He'll light a cigar by bending into a lit fireplace in the middle of a party and not bat an eye. There's no need for decorum when it just seems pointless and you're a big, buff, strong guy who knows you can take everyone in the room at the same time. And that blasé attitude towards societal expectations really brings him to the top for me. Vohans, Shara's university peer, ex-boyfriend, hails from the Divine Continent itself and went to university in Sepur with Shara, has now become one of the larger political figures in Bulakov. He brings a ton of wit and wordplay that you will not be seeing from a lot of the other characters in this story. Shara certainly can match him at points, but still, she looks to him as this kind of master of this game that they play. His conversations are just that. Games to be played, like a battle of smarts, like Yu-Gi-Oh! But he also brings this very kind of naive and positive outlook to the political situations that are going on. And when in this world, many others are so sullen, it can be really refreshing. But it also brings a lot of pain to me as a reader, because you just know that his hopes and dreams are how things ought to be, but they cannot really be brought to fruition. It does feel like he's the foil for that purpose. He's meant to bring those facts to the reader's conscious mind. He says the super progressive pie in the sky idea of like, hey, why can't we all just kind of get along and help each other and subsidize the problems that are going on? And this is an idyllic and impossible idea for the rest of the world, but it does sound like the best option. And before even the other character in that conversation can shoot it down, the reader already will, because they know this world so well from the way that Robert Jackson Bennet has been able to portray every other character and their internal workings and just how this world works as a whole. And that hurts. The rest of these characters and this world building create such a unfortunately well-placed cynicism in the reader that he's so perfect to fit this foil role with his grand ideas for a better tomorrow. Now, the mysteries of this book dig significantly deeper than just a murder whodunit. And each time we follow Shara make a step forward in discovery, the floor breaks out from beneath her and we fall into yet another mystery to be unraveled. And as these conspiratorious events start to grow, it never feels overwhelming to a reader. I think that that's a major strength in the writing here. Despite all these extremely heavy themes, on top of an already twisting and turning mystery structure, on top of handling all of this really deep and important world building, the reader is still wholly capable of following these clues, understanding the mysteries, and putting together those clues to kind of figure things out on their own before a character might be able to. It's really well structured in that way. And for just how jam-packed the content is, it's pretty short, like I said at the beginning. It's only like 116,000 words. That's about the length of the Golden Compass. It's certainly not short by any measure, but when you're like me and you've been stuck with reading massive tomes of Stormlight and Malazan and Mistborn and so many words in a single book, this is short. And truly, Bennett is able to create just as rich a world in this book as those authors are able to do in theirs. He's able to do it by keeping the scope smaller. We're really focusing on one city, though we do get to look out and see the rest of the world. We're focusing on a history that isn't known at the start of the book, and we have to, as part of the mystery, unravel it as we go, which is extremely efficient in his writing, where we're tying that plot with that world building to create a way more natural kind of exposition story that will give us a lot of information, but we're dying for this information because it's going to help us get answers for what's going on in the mysteries. That's crazy efficient for like this lofty of a world that he's made. I don't think there was a moment where I really felt that the pace staggered in any way. There are intentionally slow moments, but those feel intentional and they feel like a big refresher after a lot of high-paced stuff going on. And that's perfect for this thriller mystery. You can't always be going up the tension train. You need to have those, you need to let out the air of the balloon a little bit. The third act is probably the only place where I would levy any criticism, and it's not much, just a few minor points that I'll save for my spoiler section. Otherwise, this book is a really amazing read. Don't expect high-octane energy like you just shotgunned a Red Bull. This is a slow, sipping story that is really fun the whole time. I'll give it almost all the stairs in my house, except for those few that you always forget about when you're walking down them at night, and then you get really scared when you step, but then it's still another step. Yeah, we'll give it that. I don't know. Well, that's what I'm feeling. It's a city of stairs. Take it or leave it. A super solid story with some really interesting and nuanced characters. Go check it out if you haven't. I'm telling you, this is a great book. Something I think that deserves a lot more attention. I haven't really heard a lot of people talking about this book. Maybe it's because I'm late to the party. So you know what? Because I'm late to the party, I'm hosting an after party. Everyone get in here, read that book, and come tell me how awesome it was. Or tell me if you didn't like it. Let me know in those comments if you read this book and you don't think it's as good as I feel. Like, I want to see those opinions. Go read it if you haven't yet. Come right back here and we can start that after party off with some spoiler thoughts that I got. Are they gone? All right. Now that we've rid ourselves of all those who are excited to go read this or have lost all interest in this masterpiece that I am about to gush over for a little bit longer, it's just you and me now. We can talk about some of the spicier spoilers. I have been dying to talk about Sigrid more, all right? He is our character right out of myth. He walks up, he cleans out that entire kidnapper cult with not much to go off of, slays a great sea monster naked and covered in whale fat, I think, maybe some oil, I don't recall. Lard? I think it was lard. And turns out to be the long-thought dead king of his people. His uncaringness for decorum really plays into this kind of backstory that he has, where he was once kind of set up to be royalty, but none of that matters anymore. As well as the decorum of not being from this place, not being from this rather more puritanical society than what is probably happening up in the north where he is from the context clues we get in this story. It's amazing to see those two worlds clash with him and other characters in Bulgakov. Those scenes shine so much for me. He's also an amazing character in those slower moments as well, when he's just being a friend to Shara. The relationship between the two is really heartwarming at times. It's like inside you, there are two wolves. One who seeks safety and comfort and long naps, and Shara, the one who is working hard all the time and hunts all day and needs to be reminded to take a break. Peak character, the whole book. I loved every time Sigrid had to open his mouth to tell me something. I also really appreciate, as I said in the spoiler-free portion, the efficiency of the way that this story is told, with the world building being interwoven with this mystery plot. It feeds this incredibly interesting theme that Robert Jackson Bennet is exploring here of history that is controlled by victors suffers many losses, even to the detriment of those victors. The importance of uncovering the lost knowledge of the divine cities is so pivotal to uncovering these other mysteries that are going on. And it's ultimately the critical linchpin of the whole thing in the final act of revealing that Zhukov didn't actually die. These plot points are so amazingly hinted at as we go throughout the story. We're getting a lot of pieces of the puzzle before we even realize it. And as we're approaching the end, they all start to fall into place to where you can start feeling like a smart person. And I want to do that when I'm reading a mystery. The Kaj, who was really just torturing his mother to figure out how to defeat the gods, to Zhukov hiding away in the mirror with the other god and using that Movost to trick the Kaj into thinking that he was dead, to the reveal of the cult leader really being Vo's brother that we've heard mention of a few times at this point. It's all so well woven together and so in your face that I feel it lends itself to rereads from the mystery aspects alone. I am also extremely interested in the exploration of the gods and their intentions, driven more from the prayers of their people, the ideas and desires of those people than their own intentional goals. The people sought to be punished for things that were meaningful, as said by one of the gods at the end of this story. And so they almost have this shardic intent requirement to act on the will of the people, to provide that meaning to them. It's a very interesting commentary to be made about religion in real life, to have meaning, to have a dharma, to have a community that recognizes you and that you matter in and allows all of you to come together is so important to the human condition. And religion is certainly one of the paths that can lead to those things. But like any community driven by belief, these beliefs can be weaponized, even non-religious ones, unto the outside community as well as to those within, causing a lot of harm should you let yourself be more driven by exclusively these desires of self-importance and meaning rather than the greater good of creating a safe, empowering community that can be empathetic to views, not only your own and not only the extremely opposite ones, but those ones that fall in between that don't point quite to the same north that yours do. to. I'm sure someone wiser than me could spin these themes in the book into some wonderful doctoral thesis with comparisons to Abrahamic religions with pointed critique. But I just appreciate the exploration of these ideas that Bennet is conveying in this story on top of everything else that he's throwing at us. The Pain of Sapir is a masterwork of showing imperialism from both sides of the coin. This idea that might makes right is oh so incredibly wrong on both sides of the aggression, and this book definitely showcases that. At first, there's this entirely valid pain and rage felt by the Sapir people, one of feeling ignored, abandoned, unimportant for not having their own god to protect them from those that are stronger and that are willing to enslave them. But then, as they expand their own power, as they invent gun and take over the divine continent, that bubbles up to completely eliminating the history of the people that enslaved them. And there's a reflection of that feeling of being ignored by letting the cities continue to stagnate and starve themselves out in their turmoil, and poor support and lack of aid from the government that's not flowing into this continent after they've destroyed most of their infrastructure. The critique that this theme is getting at is that violence cannot be met with retribution. Not entirely, at least. Certainly, the pain that the divine continent felt in the coming weeks after the falling of their gods, loss of loved ones, winked out of existence when those great cities shrunk to their non-divine, truthful states, complete overthrowing of their government and infrastructure and any sources of safety that they once had. Surely, this is where the retribution needs to stop, and the rehabilitative justice needs to kick in. Otherwise, things are only going to get worse for both sides of the conflict. And once again, Bennet is able to reflect that in such a nuanced way in this story. I've been gushing for a minute. Let's talk about my minor, but still kind of important to me gripe that I have with the end of this book. And that would be, of course, Vohan's death right near the end. Perfect, strict interpretation of bury your gaze trope that I am not fond of at all. And it doesn't really do much to further the story in any way other than to make the reader and Shara feel sad, I guess. A lot of the things that happen after he dies, I don't feel were directly related to him dying, except maybe Shara was a bit more distraught while doing them. It doesn't feel like those conclusions that she comes to resolve these issues needed to stem from the death of Vo. And not only that, but the death was so pitiful and heart-wrenching after such an amazing speech where he shames this god to his face for acts of cruelty as a divine being expected to bring protection to their people. That speech he gives, amazing. Wonderful, a masterpiece. Immediately killing Vo right after, whack as hell. There's this amazing backstory that we get for him through flashbacks throughout the book that is this strain that he has to put on his relationship with Shara as he's coming to terms with his own sexuality. And that ultimately ends up breaking this relationship apart, and they don't see each other for so long. And we feel that pain of what could have been if they were able to remain as friends. What political power could they have influenced to make this a better world had they stayed near each other instead of having to break apart? And it makes me hurt for what could have been because we don't get to see how they can remedy that because he just gets killed. That backstory really draws you close to appreciate both sides of their pain in this interaction, but then we just don't get to explore more with him because he's dead. Now, there's something to be said about harsh realities that this book lives and revels in, and how this is just a furthering of that even in a world of gods walking the earth, atrocities will happen and even be committed by those gods at times. But come on, our one gay character that we've come to appreciate and know and understand, I just wasn't wild about it. I think that's going to bring our spoiler thoughts to a close. I have so many emotions about this book. It's still just kind of a scrambled soup of appreciation and desire to better understand my own thoughts after reading it. And it's been months. Oh my God. I'm telling you, so many months of I've read this book and I've just been ruminating on it, and I've been trying to figure out what I want to say. And I don't even feel like I was able to say a lot here other than I feel I need other people to read this book for how much I really liked it. But I still can't put it together, and I need a bit more time, but I really wanted to talk about this book, so here we are. And I think that happens sometimes when someone writes something that you really kind of feel connected to. Those ideas really just stimulate the brain wrinkles in your noggin, especially when you're provided just so much to think about in such a short amount of time. And when it's so well crafted as it is here with this wonderful story and these amazing characters, I can only look in awe and expect I'll be thinking about this book for many months to come. What book left you with that feeling? That feeling where you know it was good, you know you loved it, but when you need to put it into words, you just can't. It's just too much that the human lexicon just doesn't have the bandwidth to be able to meet what you need to convey your thoughts to others. Give me a book that fits that description down in those comments. And while you're down there, if you think that anything that I had to say here was at all interesting, why don't you think about hitting that little like button? And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. I'm gonna be talking about way more things coming up. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll catch you in the next one. And until then, stay lit.